The audition room door closed. The script only called for a simple verbal argument. But suddenly, the famous leading man delivered a brutal slap, knocked the actress down, shook her, and pinned her forcefully to the floor to satisfy his predatory sexual aggression. And the most disgusting part of this entire situation, the legendary director standing right next to them did not intervene at all. He just watched and laughed. That actress's real physical trauma was later bought off for a few $1,000s in a strict gag order. This was not art. This was a crime. The American public bought a massive, carefully engineered lie during the 1990s. The entertainment industry completely fabricated a flawless superstar and sold that false image to millions of moviegoers. The man committing that violence inside the audition room was not some unknown fringe independent actor. The attacker was Val Kilmer, one of the most famous, highly paid, and universally desired leading men in the entire world. Studio publicists spent fortunes crafting a specific, highly lucrative public persona. The magazines portrayed a brooding, romantic, mysterious artist. The audience genuinely believed the heroic figure saving the day on the cinema screen was the exact same gentleman walking the glamorous red carpets. The studios manufactured this top star image by heavily promoting a specific type of cinematic hero. The leading man played the icy, confident fighter pilot. In Top Gun, the actor literally put on the suit to play the billionaire vigilante in Batman Forever. The media pushed the narrative of the cool, rebellious outsider who possessed a good heart. Entertainment journalists printed endless stories about his intense dedication to the craft. Late-night television hosts lobbed easy, flattering questions to keep the promotional machine running smoothly. The Hollywood ecosystem packaged a heartthrob, and the global audience consumed the product without asking a single question about the reality behind his fake public image. Behind that image, a completely different, infinitely darker reality existed. The industry insiders absolutely knew the truth. Talent agents, studio executives, and camera operators understood the massive, disturbing difference between the charming movie star and the actual human being. When the bright studio lights turned off, the romantic hero vanished instantly. The working professionals on the actual movie sets did not view the celebrity as a savior or a passionate artist. The crews viewed the leading man as an absolute nightmare. The Hollywood machine simply chose to hide the dark side of their biggest financial asset to protect their massive investments. The entertainment industry uses very specific sanitized code words to protect its most toxic stars. When a powerful celebrity creates a hostile work environment, screams at the crew, or crosses physical boundaries, the public relations team never uses the word abuser. The press releases never use the word bully. The studios simply label the star as difficult. That specific word is a calculated shield. Legendary film director Joel Schumacher entirely destroyed that shield. Schumacher directed the leading man in a massive global superhero blockbuster. The veteran filmmaker eventually went on the public record and called the actor the most difficult human being he had ever worked with in his entire life. The heavy weight of that specific accusation is staggering. A veteran Hollywood director like Joel Schumacher spent decades managing massive egos, navigating celebrity tantrums, and dealing with the most spoiled individuals on the planet. Out of all the chaotic personalities in the American film industry, the veteran filmmaker singled out this specific actor as the absolute worst. In the closed, high-pressure environment of a movie set, earning the title of the most difficult person alive does not mean the actor simply demanded too many retakes or complained about the catering. Earning that specific title means the individual actively destroyed the mental health of the crew, bullied the support staff, and operated with a terrifying lack of basic professional empathy. The corporate studio bosses tolerated this monstrous behavior for one single predictable reason. The movies generated hundreds of millions of dollars at the global box office. The financial executives sitting in the corner offices looked at the massive profit margins and actively chose to ignore the damage left behind on the sound stages. They tolerated the abuser because the abuser generated money. That exact corporate tolerance created a very dangerous, highly volatile sense of absolute invincibility. The actor realized very quickly that the normal rules of basic human decency simply did not apply to a massive box office star. If a celebrity can terrorize a massive film crew without facing a single consequence, that celebrity will inevitably push the boundaries even further when the audience disappears. This unchecked, toxic arrogance eventually bled directly into the casting process for the 1991 biographical film, The Doors. To fully grasp the sheer terror of this specific incident, the physical layout, and the psychological trap of the American Hollywood casting room must be exposed. A casting office is not a glamorous, brightly lit movie set. The room is usually a small, closed, soundproof box hidden deep inside a massive corporate studio lot. The environment is specifically designed to be intimidating. The power dynamic inside that closed room is completely terrifying and heavily skewed against the incoming talent. On one side of the table sit the wealthy producers, the famous director, and the established A-list leading man. These individuals hold all the money, all the influence, and the absolute power to make or break a career in a matter of seconds. On the opposite side of the room stands a vulnerable, hopeful performer desperately trying to secure a paycheck and a breakout role. Young actors in America are heavily conditioned by the brutal industry to never say no. Acting coaches literally teach their students to accept any direction, push past their own personal boundaries, and do whatever it takes to impress the powerful people running the audition. If a young performer questions a strange request or refuses to do something uncomfortable during a reading, the casting director instantly labels that performer as uncooperative. The actor is dismissed, the door is locked, and the next desperate candidate is immediately called into the room. The entire casting process functions as a brutal elimination system designed to force total compliance and absolute submission from the talent pool. The actors entering the room are painfully aware that thousands of other people are waiting in the hallway, ready to take their place. The financial desperation and the hunger for success create a perfect, silent trap. This oppressive environment brings the story directly to the year 1989 and a highly talented actress named Caitlin O'Heaney. Caitlin received a phone call that every single working actor in Los Angeles waits their entire life to answer. The studio wanted the actress to come in and read for a major, highly coveted part in an upcoming blockbuster movie. The production team was searching for someone to play Pamela Corson, the primary romantic partner of the famous rock star Jim Morrison. For Caitlin, this was not just another random Tuesday audition to pay the rent. This specific opportunity represented a massive career breakthrough. Securing a lead role in an Oliver Stone film opposite one of the biggest heartthrobs in the world meant instant global fame, financial security, and permanent untouchable status in the entertainment industry. Caitlin prepared extensively for the high-stakes meeting. The actress studied the script pages, memorized the specific dialogue, and walked into that soundproof room fully expecting a standard professional workplace evaluation. In the film industry, this specific type of meeting is called a chemistry read. A chemistry read is supposed to be a highly controlled, safe, simulated environment involving two professionals reading written lines from a piece of paper. The process is designed to test the vocal delivery, the emotional range, and the basic on-screen interaction between the potential co-stars. It is absolutely never supposed to involve unchoreographed physical combat. The young woman genuinely believed she was stepping into a legitimate, respectful, artistic process. The performer thought she was there to act. Caitlin had absolutely no idea the room was not a professional space. The actress was completely unaware that the leading man and the famous director had secretly turned the casting session into a sick, twisted psychological and physical trap. The blockbuster star did not view Caitlin as a respected colleague or a potential scene partner. The arrogant celebrity simply viewed the incoming actress as a disposable object. The Hollywood top star planned to use the closed-door audition as a free pass to unleash a completely unscripted, violent physical attack under the fake protective disguise of evaluating acting skills. The entire glamorous facade of the romantic American leading man was about to drop completely, revealing a cold, calculating abuser who used his massive industry influence to terrorize a woman who simply walked into a room looking for a job. The violence that followed would completely shatter her career while actively protecting his. The trap was set, the soundproof door was locked, and the actress walked right into the center of the room. We have to look at the exact minute-by-minute timeline of those next 10 minutes, because what happened next completely destroyed the boundary between a Hollywood audition and a criminal assault. The most damning piece of evidence in this entire scandal is the actual physical screenplay they were holding in their hands. In the entertainment industry, the script is the absolute law. It dictates every single movement, every camera angle, and every interaction. The pages Caitlin O'Heaney memorized that morning contained a very specific, carefully written scene. The text strictly called for a verbal argument. The script required the two characters to yell at each other, exchange harsh words, and build emotional tension through dialogue. There were absolutely no stage directions indicating any physical contact. There were no stunt coordinators present in the room. There were no safety mats placed on the floor. Despite those clear written boundaries, Val Kilmer completely abandoned the text. The actor did not try to deliver a compelling vocal performance. Instead, the blockbuster star suddenly delivered a brutal slap and a closed fist directly at Caitlin's face. We have to stop and deeply analyze the specific mechanics of that strike inside a professional workplace. A trained Hollywood professional might occasionally use a fake, open palm slap and pull their physical energy back at the last second to create a visual illusion for a camera. A brutal strike is a completely different reality. You do not strike a colleague to evaluate artistic chemistry. You use it to physically harm the human being standing in front of you. It was an unprovoked, violent hit that immediately crossed the line into felony assault. The violence did not stop with a single strike. The initial hit was just the beginning of a relentless, terrifying physical escalation. The massive leading man grabbed the actress and physically lifted her entirely off the ground. Think about the severe power dynamic and the sheer physical terror of that specific moment. The attacker used his superior size and heavy muscle mass to completely strip away her physical defense. He suspended the actress in midair and began shaking her violently. This is a tactic designed to cause total disorientation. When a human body is violently shaken, the brain instantly triggers a primal biological panic response. The victim loses all sense of balance, spatial awareness, and the ability to fight back. After shaking the actress aggressively, the attacker forcefully slammed Caitlin directly onto the hard floor of the audition room. The severe impact knocked the wind completely out of her lungs, but the nightmare continued. The famous celebrity immediately jumped on top of the stunned actress, using his entire body weight to pin her tightly against the ground. He restricted her movement, trapping her underneath him. The actor used the completely fake excuse of character motivation to justify holding a woman against her will on the floor to satisfy his own predatory sexual aggression. This was not an acting exercise. This was a brutal display of absolute physical dominance. The Hollywood icon wanted to prove that he could inflict massive physical harm and sexual intimidation on a female colleague right in the middle of a corporate office and get away with it completely. When a massive man pins a much smaller woman to the floor in a locked room, the biological reality of extreme terror takes over. The victim genuinely believes her life is in immediate, severe danger. The most sickening, horrifying detail of this entire 10-minute ordeal is not actually the physical violence itself. The most terrifying aspect is the absolute silence from the third person in that room. Legendary filmmaker Oliver Stone was standing mere feet away from the violent attack. The director is the absolute authority figure on any movie production. The director holds the supreme power to protect the actors, control the environment, and instantly stop any dangerous situation simply by shouting the word cut. Oliver Stone completely refused to say that word. As the massive leading man slapped the actress, lifted her into the air, slammed her down, and pinned her to the floor, the visionary director did not intervene. Stone did not step forward to pull the attacker off the victim. The filmmaker did not rush to the door to call for studio security. According to the horrific accounts, Oliver Stone just stood there, crossed his arms, watched the brutal assault unfold, and actually laughed. We need to confront the absolute depravity of that specific laughter. A woman was fighting for her physical safety, experiencing real terror, and taking actual physical damage, while the man in charge treated her pain like a private comedy show. The director's laughter completely validated the attacker's violent actions. It sent a clear, immediate signal to the leading man that the abuse was entirely acceptable, actively encouraged, and highly entertaining. This dynamic exposes the absolute toxic rot at the core of the American studio system. It reveals the terrifying reality of the Hollywood Boys Club. The Boys Club is a deeply entrenched network where powerful men actively cover up the crimes of other powerful men. Inside this corrupt ecosystem, male violence against women is not considered a legal liability. It is treated as a twisted bonding exercise. The audition room ceased to be a professional casting office. The director and the actor transformed that closed room into a private place of abuse. The filmmaker allowed the actor to use the actress to test the physical and emotional endurance limits of his co-star. They completely dehumanized her, reducing a talented working professional to nothing more than a disposable object for their violent, artistic experiment. The men protected each other, silently agreeing that the victim's pain was just the necessary cost of making a great American movie. When the brutal assault finally ended and the actor stepped away from the floor, the director's reaction was chillingly cold and casual. Oliver Stone looked at the devastated, bruised actress struggling on the ground and simply remarked that the interaction was a little wild. The filmmaker used the exact same casual tone a person might use to describe a turbulent airplane flight or a loud rock concert. The director completely minimized a felony assault. By calling it wild, Stone actively erased the severe criminality of the act and framed the terrifying violence as just another intense Hollywood acting method. He took a moment of pure trauma and instantly rebranded it as creative passion. The victim was left entirely alone to process the massive trauma. No one offered her medical assistance. No one apologized. Caitlin managed to scramble off the floor, escape the soundproof room, and run frantically out of the studio building. The actress locked herself inside her car in the parking lot. The physical adrenaline finally wore off, and the sheer terror of the reality crashed down on her nervous system. Caitlin sat alone in that vehicle and cried uncontrollably for 20 straight minutes. Those 20 minutes of crying in a parked car represent the true hidden cost of American cinema. While the director and the leading man likely went out for expensive lunches to celebrate finding their perfect, aggressive movie character, the actress was left trembling, bruised, and completely traumatized. Her physical safety was violated, her professional trust was permanently shattered, and her basic human dignity was treated like a joke by the most powerful men in her industry. The men inside that room walked away with millions of dollars in future box office revenue and endless industry awards, while the victim was left suffering from severe, long-term psychological and sexual trauma. She was left with a paralyzing fear of being pinned and assaulted by a man in power. This specific event was never about finding the right emotional tone for a biographical movie. This was always about two powerful men utilizing their absolute industry authority to execute a violent predatory power trip without facing a single legal consequence. After the victim escaped that soundproof room and broke down crying in her car, you might expect the Hollywood system to hit the panic button. In any standard corporate office across America, an unprovoked physical assault results in immediate termination and a direct call to local law enforcement. The entertainment industry operates under a completely different, highly corrupted set of rules. Instead of helping Caitlin O'Heaney, the production team immediately activated a massive coordinated gaslighting campaign. The studio executives did not care about the victim's physical safety or her mental trauma. The executives only cared about protecting their multi-million-dollar biographical picture and their famous leading man. To protect the movie, the studio had to systematically destroy the victim's credibility and rewrite the entire narrative of what happened inside that room. The person leading this aggressive cover-up was not some faceless corporate lawyer. The primary architect of the gaslighting was the film's casting director, Risa Bramon Garcia. We need to critically examine the actual job description of a casting director to understand the massive betrayal here. This individual is explicitly hired to find talent, coordinate auditions, and, most importantly, maintain a safe professional environment for actors. The casting director is supposed to act as the protective barrier between vulnerable talent and powerful studio bosses. Risa Bramon Garcia completely abandoned that fundamental responsibility. Instead of condemning the unprovoked violence she helped facilitate, the casting executive actively shielded the attacker and used her industry influence directly against the victim. Garcia's first public defense of the violent incident is absolutely sickening. The casting director confidently told the press that all the actresses auditioning that day were given a prior warning about potential physical contact. Let us completely dismantle the legal and logical absurdity of that specific statement. In the highly regulated world of professional film production, The phrase physical contact has a very strict, legally defined meaning. A warning about physical contact means a scene might require a scripted hug, a brief touch on the shoulder, or perhaps a safely choreographed push supervised by a professional stunt coordinator. A vague warning about physical contact never translates into an open invitation for a massive male movie star to deliver a brutal slap, throw a woman to the floor, and forcefully pin her down. The casting director deliberately twisted standard industry terminology to justify a blatant felony. When the prior warning excuse failed to fully explain the sheer brutality of the attack, the casting director pivoted to an even more toxic Hollywood defense strategy. Garcia claimed that the famous leading man was simply carried away by his emotions during the intense scene. This specific phrase is the ultimate excuse for abusive men in the entertainment business. We have to separate the concept of human emotion from the reality of deliberate physical action. Anger is an emotion. Passion is an emotion. Slapping a human being, lifting them completely off the ground, shaking them violently, and slamming them onto a hard floor is absolutely not an emotion. That specific sequence of events requires a series of deliberate, conscious physical choices. If the actor was truly experiencing a completely uncontrollable emotional blackout, his violence would be entirely random and unfocused. The actor would have smashed a window, broken a chair, or attacked the famous director standing right next to him. Strangely, these intense emotional blackouts only ever seem to target the most vulnerable, physically smaller women in the room. The violence was not an accident caused by overwhelming passion. The violence was a highly calculated display of physical dominance, and the casting director provided the perfect public relations excuse to hide that disturbing fact from the public. The absolute lowest point of this entire coordinated cover-up happened when Garcia decided to attack the victim's sanity directly. The casting executive went on the record and explicitly accused Caitlin O'Heaney of blowing the entire situation completely out of proportion. This is textbook psychological warfare. It is the exact definition of collective gaslighting. The Hollywood system takes a person who just experienced severe physical trauma and publicly brands them as a hysterical, dramatic liar. The victim knows exactly what happened. The victim feels the actual physical bruises on their body. The victim vividly remembers the terrifying sensation of being pinned to the floor by a massive man. But the powerful studio machinery blasts a completely different, sanitized narrative into the mainstream media. The casting director used her established position of authority to tell the entire world that the actress was just making a massive deal out of a standard acting exercise. When a massive corporation tells the public that a victim is crazy, the public usually listens. This tactic completely isolates the target and destroys their mental health. Caitlin O'Heaney was no longer just fighting the man who attacked her. The actress was now fighting an entire multi-billion-dollar industry that was actively calling her a liar. The victim is forced to go home and question their own memory, wondering if they actually did overreact to a violent crime. That specific psychological breakdown is exactly what the studio wants. A confused, doubting victim is much less likely to file a lawsuit or call the police. This gaslighting campaign eventually extended far beyond the casting department and moved directly into the legal realm. Years after the incident, when independent reporters occasionally brought up the brutal casting session, the legal team representing the blockbuster star deployed their own brand of sanitized corporate manipulation. The actor's highly paid lawyer publicly dismissed the severe assault by calling it a simple workplace mishap. We need to pause and examine the chilling absolute sociopathy required to use that specific word in this context. The English language defines a mishap as an unlucky minor accident. Dropping a cup of hot coffee on a script is a workplace mishap. Tripping over a heavy lighting cable on a soundstage is a mishap. A massive celebrity intentionally striking a woman, throwing her to the ground, and trapping her underneath his body weight is a violent battery charge. By using the word mishap, the legal team intentionally erased the criminal intent of their client. The lawyers downgraded a terrifying physical violation into a minor, forgettable administrative error. The legal defense team used expensive corporate vocabulary to sanitize the violence and completely strip the victim of her rightful status as a survivor of assault. They treated the destruction of a woman's physical safety like a minor accounting error that just needed to be filed away in a cabinet. This entire highly coordinated defense strategy relies entirely on the most toxic, overused excuse in the American film industry. I am talking about the concept of method acting. For decades, Hollywood has used the idea of extreme method acting to excuse the absolute worst workplace behavior imaginable. Actors constantly claim they need to completely inhabit the dark mind of a character, and the studio executives use this artistic claim to forgive any damage left behind on the set. The actor in this specific audition room claimed he had to be violent because he was playing a famous rock star who lived a chaotic, aggressive lifestyle. The production team completely backed up this ridiculous claim. They built an entire media narrative arguing that the actor was simply sacrificing himself for the art, pushing the absolute limits of human endurance to deliver a realistic, gritty performance. The hypocrisy of this specific method acting excuse is absolutely mind-blowing. If you speak to the actual people who knew the real rock star the movie was based on, they completely destroy the actor's aggressive interpretation. The real-life musician was certainly troubled and suffered from massive addiction issues, but the musician's close friends explicitly stated that he never behaved like a violent, abusive psychopath toward women. The leading man did not actually do any legitimate historical research. The celebrity did not embody the real historical figure. The blockbuster star simply created a fake, highly aggressive version of the character in his own head, because that fake version gave him a convenient excuse to hurt people. The actor used the character as a literal permission slip to unleash his own predatory instincts. Method acting simply became a legally protected license to abuse female coworkers. The American entertainment press loves to write glowing magazine articles about actors who stay in character for months, heavily praising their intense dedication to the craft. But true artistic dedication does not require sending a female colleague to the hospital. True, authentic talent does not require traumatizing a coworker in a locked room. The studio system intentionally blurred the line between acting and abuse because the abuse generated a performance that looked raw and intense on camera. The casting director, the public relations team, and the expensive lawyers all worked together in perfect harmony to build a massive, protective wall around the attacker. They created a completely false reality where the attacker was a brilliant, misunderstood artist, and the bleeding victim was just a hysterical woman trying to ruin a great movie. This relentless psychological manipulation successfully protected the leading man's career, ensuring he could continue working on massive blockbuster sets and walking red carpets. Meanwhile, the actual victim was left completely trapped in a nightmare, watching her attacker receive global praise. The system proved beyond any doubt that it would go to any length, tell any lie, and destroy any reputation to protect its star. This aggressive cover-up directly set the stage for the final, most insulting corporate transaction of the entire ordeal, where the studio decided to put an exact price tag on a woman's trauma. The coordinated gaslighting campaign and the aggressive public relations spin completely failed to break the victim's resolve. Caitlin O'Heaney did not just sit quietly in her car and accept the abuse. The young actress actually did exactly what any ordinary citizen is supposed to do when they experience a violent physical attack. The performer drove directly to the Los Angeles Police Department and officially filed a criminal battery report against Val Kilmer. Filing that specific piece of paper is the absolute ultimate threat to a major American movie studio. A formal police report means a permanent public record. Public records inevitably lead to media investigations, criminal charges, and catastrophic damage to a blockbuster film's box office revenue. The exact moment that police report entered the legal system, the Hollywood machinery stopped using casting directors to manipulate the narrative. The studio completely dropped the fake artistic excuses and deployed their actual weapons. The production company, Carolco Pictures, alongside director Oliver Stone and the leading man, unleashed a massive team of highly paid corporate lawyers to crush the victim. This is where we have to deeply examine the dark, extremely toxic reality of American corporate law. When a massive entertainment corporation faces a criminal accusation, they do not look for justice. They look for a legal loophole to completely bury the problem. The legal team cornered the actress and brought the full terrifying weight of a billion-dollar industry crashing down directly onto her shoulders. A single working professional simply cannot fight a room full of ruthless corporate attorneys. The lawyers presented a very clear, completely uncompromising ultimatum. The studio offered a financial settlement to make the police report disappear, but this settlement was actually a trap, disguised as a resolution. The legal document placed in front of the traumatized actress included a strict non-disclosure agreement. We need to break down exactly how an NDA functions within the American entertainment business. Originally, a non-disclosure agreement was designed to protect legitimate corporate trade secrets. Hollywood executives completely misused this legal contract. The studios mutated the NDA into an unbreakable legal gag order, used specifically to protect abusers and cover up violent crimes. By signing that piece of paper, the victim is legally barred from ever speaking about the assault, the attacker, or the settlement itself. If the victim ever breaks the silence, the massive corporation will instantly sue them for breach of contract, dragging them through endless court battles until they are completely bankrupt. It is a legal mechanism designed to enforce absolute, terrifying silence. The financial details of this specific settlement perfectly expose the absolute cheapness of a human being's dignity in Hollywood. The massive studio producing a movie with a budget of tens of millions of dollars offered Caitlin O'Heaney a total settlement of exactly $24,500. Let us really analyze that specific number. That amount is literal pocket change for a blockbuster movie production. It is less money than the studio probably spent on catering for the film crew, but the reality of that payout is actually much more insulting. After the government took standard taxes, and after the defense lawyers extracted their massive legal fees, the victim did not walk away with $24,000. Caitlin O'Heaney walked away with exactly $8,000. Think about the severe, sickening math happening right there. The American film industry officially decided that a woman's physical safety, her mental trauma, and her permanent silence were worth a grand total of $8,000. The studio essentially bought a violently obtained casting session for the price of a used car. The executives paid off a violent felony using cheap pocket change. The lawyers promised that if the actress signed the contract and took the small check, the entire nightmare would end. That was another massive, calculated corporate lie. In the entertainment industry, taking a settlement and reporting a powerful star to the police marks you permanently. The industry absolutely hates a whistleblower. The studio bosses view anyone who fights back against the toxic hierarchy as a massive legal liability. The moment the ink dried on that non-disclosure agreement, the Hollywood machine quietly and efficiently executed Caitlin O'Heaney's entire acting career. The actress was immediately thrown onto the Hollywood blacklist. We need to understand the mechanics of this specific punishment. The blacklist is not a literal piece of paper pinned to a wall in a studio office. The blacklist is a highly effective, invisible whisper network. It operates through silent phone calls, canceled meetings, and suddenly closed doors. A casting director will see a blacklisted name on a submission list and simply cross it out without saying a word. The phone just completely stops ringing. For a while, the actress kept trying to work. Caitlin kept studying, kept preparing, and kept waiting for the next opportunity, but the opportunities completely vanished. Eventually, the brutal truth was delivered directly by her own talent representative. Her agent had to sit the actress down and deliver the most devastating news a working professional can ever hear. The agent stated clearly that absolutely nobody in the entire industry wanted to call her in for an audition ever again. The executives, the producers, and the casting directors all knew exactly what happened in that soundproof room, and they collectively decided to punish the victim for refusing to take the physical abuse quietly. The industry completely closed its ranks to protect the violent leading man, and they systematically starved the victim out of the business. You cannot survive in Los Angeles if the gatekeepers completely refuse to let you walk into the room. The retaliation was total and absolute. The actress was forced to completely abandon her life's work. Caitlin O'Heaney packed up her belongings, left the American entertainment capital entirely, and relocated to rural Wisconsin. A highly trained, incredibly talented artist was forced to rebuild her entire existence from scratch, eventually taking a job working for the environmental organization Greenpeace. Her entire cinematic future was completely erased. We must put these two separate life trajectories directly next to each other to see the absolute failure of justice. Look at what happened to the man who threw the punch. Val Kilmer suffered absolutely zero professional consequences for committing a violent physical assault in a corporate office. In fact, the violent attack actually secured him the lead role. The director rewarded the abuse by handing the actor the keys to a massive blockbuster film. The celebrity used that specific movie as a direct launching pad to reach the absolute peak of global stardom. The actor went on to secure massive multi-million-dollar contracts. The leading man put on the Batman suit. The star walked down hundreds of glamorous red carpets, smiled for thousands of flashing cameras, and built a massive cinematic legacy. The Hollywood system actively rewarded the attacker with infinite wealth, supreme power, and universal public adoration. At the exact same time, the system forced the victim into complete obscurity, rural exile, and total professional ruin. The top star's massive empire was built directly on top of the crushed career and the silenced trauma of a young female artist. The attacker traded 10 minutes of unhinged, violent behavior for a lifetime of absolute Hollywood glory, while the victim was handed an $8,000 check and a permanent death sentence for her career. This is not a story about a brilliant artistic process. This is the exact blueprint of how a multi-billion-dollar industry successfully protects its abusers. The studio executives and the highly paid public relations teams worked incredibly hard to frame that horrific casting room attack as an isolated incident. They desperately wanted the public to believe that the violent outburst was just a one-time accident caused by intense method acting. The defense team argued the actor simply got too deeply lost inside the troubled mind of a rock star. We need to completely destroy that specific excuse right now. When you actually examine the leading man's behavior across multiple different movie sets, a very clear, disturbing pattern emerges. The violent attack against Caitlin O'Heaney was absolutely not an anomaly. It was his fundamental operating system. The actor did not just target vulnerable women in closed audition rooms. The blockbuster star actively terrorized entire film crews, openly bullying anyone who dared to stand in his way. The American entertainment capital has a very toxic habit of protecting people like this. Hollywood operates under a deeply flawed cultural concept known as the difficult genius. Industry insiders frequently use the word genius to completely excuse terrible human behavior. They pretend that acting like a ruthless tyrant is somehow a necessary side effect of brilliant artistic talent. The system trains the audience to accept that great art requires innocent people to suffer. Let us look directly at the production of Batman Forever to see how this mentality actually played out on a massive corporate stage. We are talking about one of the biggest, most expensive superhero blockbusters of the 1990s. The stakes were incredibly high, and the pressure on the film set was massive. The man sitting in the director's chair was Joel Schumacher. Schumacher was a highly respected, seasoned industry veteran who had successfully managed some of the biggest, most inflated egos in the entire entertainment business. But the veteran filmmaker hit an absolute breaking point when dealing with this specific leading man. Schumacher did not just call the actor difficult. The director went on the record and explicitly described the star as the most psychologically unstable individual he had ever encountered. Think about the severe reality of that specific statement coming from a Hollywood veteran. The instability was not just verbal. The actor's attitude was so completely out of control, so incredibly disrespectful to the working crew, that it actually escalated into a physical confrontation. The situation deteriorated to the point where the film director actually had to engage in a physical altercation with his own leading man just to force him to behave. A grown man earning millions of dollars to wear a rubber superhero suit had to be physically pushed back by his boss because his toxic attitude was destroying the entire production. The star was not using method acting to play Jim Morrison on the set of a Batman movie. The celebrity was simply weaponizing his massive box office status to bully the people around him. He knew the studio executives would never fire the guy wearing the suit, so he pushed the boundaries of basic human decency as far as he possibly could. If you think a physical shoving match with a director is the absolute peak of the madness, we have to examine a much darker, far more malicious incident. The true depth of this toxic operating system was fully exposed on the set of The Island of Dr. Moreau. This specific movie production is widely considered one of the most chaotic, miserable working environments in modern cinema history, and the leading man was the primary source of that absolute misery. The star completely stopped pretending to be a dedicated artist and simply fully embraced his role as a Hollywood tyrant. The absolute worst moment of the entire production did not involve an argument over the script or a disagreement about camera angles. It involved a completely unprovoked, calculated act of physical cruelty directed at a working-class crew member. During the grueling production, the actor actually took a burning lit cigarette and intentionally shoved the hot end directly into the face of a camera operator. We need to stop and process the sheer, cold-blooded malice required to execute that specific action. A lit cigarette burns at hundreds of degrees. Shoving it into someone's face is a direct attempt to cause permanent physical disfigurement. A camera operator is not a millionaire celebrity. A camera operator is a technical professional simply holding heavy equipment, trying to do their job, and trying to earn a paycheck to feed their family. The crew member cannot fight back. If the technician drops the camera and punches the A-list star, the technician gets fired immediately, sued by the studio, and permanently banned from the industry. The leading man knew exactly how vulnerable that crew member was. The actor used the burning cigarette as a literal weapon of humiliation. Burning another human being in the face is not a sign of a difficult genius. It is the signature move of a cowardly bully who targets individuals who possess absolutely no power to defend themselves. The celebrity inflicted permanent physical pain simply because he was bored, angry, and completely untouchable. The directors of that specific movie, the legendary John Frankenheimer, witnessed this absolute nightmare firsthand. Frankenheimer was an old-school, tough Hollywood filmmaker who had seen absolutely everything the industry had to offer. When the miserable production finally wrapped, the director did not bother using the standard polite public relations spin. Frankenheimer refused to play the corporate game. The filmmaker stepped in front of the press and issued a massive, unprecedented public condemnation. The veteran director explicitly stated that he would never, under any circumstances, associate with that specific actor ever again. Frankenheimer completely blacklisted the star from his own life, refusing to even tolerate the man's presence on a professional level. We have to look at the exact targets of his violence to understand the true psychology of an abuser. If an actor is truly experiencing a psychological break or losing their mind to method acting, their violence would be completely random. They would attack the studio head. They would throw a heavy chair through an executive's window. But this specific Hollywood star never attacked the powerful men signing his massive paychecks. He only attacked downwards. He attacked a young actress desperate for a breakout role. He fought a director when he felt his fragile ego was threatened on set. He burned the face of a working-class technician who literally could not afford to fight back. This proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that his behavior was highly calculated. He knew exactly who he could abuse without facing any immediate legal consequences. This rapid-fire timeline of absolute chaos completely destroys the initial excuse used to cover up the casting room assault. You cannot blame method acting when the exact same violent, unpredictable behavior happens across three completely different movie sets, playing three completely different characters. The actor was not sacrificing his own sanity for the sake of cinematic art. The Hollywood star never punched a concrete wall to test his own personal physical limits. The celebrity only ever directed his aggression outward, targeting vulnerable actresses, stressed directors, and defenseless camera operators. The system enabled a deeply toxic individual, handed him millions of dollars, and allowed him to treat professional workplaces like his own personal places of abuse. He did not act violently because the script demanded it. He acted violently because the American film industry gave him full permission to destroy people. The studio executives genuinely believed that cheap $8,000 gag order was a permanent solution. The power brokers sitting in those corner offices thought banishing a talented performer to rural Wisconsin completely erased their violent crime from the historical record. For nearly 3 decades, that ruthless corporate strategy actually worked perfectly. The non-disclosure agreement sat quietly in a locked file cabinet, operating as an invisible, highly effective prison cell. The victim was forced to watch from a distance as the men who destroyed her life collected Academy Awards, signed massive studio contracts, and received endless praise from the global media. Holding on to that kind of dark, isolating secret for 30 years while watching your attacker get treated like a hero requires an unbearable amount of mental endurance. Fast forward directly to the year 2017. The American entertainment industry experienced an absolute unprecedented cultural shift. The massive, historically untouchable system protecting abusive men finally started to break open. Independent investigative journalists started publishing undeniable hard proof of systemic abuse, specifically targeting the most powerful studio boss in the entire world, Harvey Weinstein. This was not just a minor celebrity scandal. This was the total collapse of the Hollywood Protection Network. The entire power structure of the entertainment capital was suddenly under a massive public microscope. We need to look closely at the exact mechanics of the #MeToo movement because it completely changed the legal and cultural landscape of the United States. Before this massive cultural shift, victims fighting billion-dollar corporations were completely isolated. The studio system intentionally divided and conquered them, using fear and legal threats to keep everyone quiet. But suddenly, the dynamic flipped completely. Women started standing together in massive numbers. One single voice breaking the silence immediately triggered another voice. The movement created a massive collective shield of public support. It proved a fundamental reality. When enough people speak out simultaneously, those billion-dollar corporate legal threats suddenly lose their terrifying power. Caitlin O'Heaney was watching this massive cultural revolution unfold from her quiet life in the Midwest. The former actress saw other working professionals taking massive personal risks, stepping in front of cameras, and exposing the exact same toxic power dynamics that destroyed her own career decades earlier. O'Heaney faced a terrifying, life-altering decision. The legal contract the production company forced her to sign back in the 1990s was still technically active. That non-disclosure agreement was still a massive legal threat pointed directly at her financial stability and her peaceful life. Let us deeply analyze the exact legal risk involved in breaking a corporate gag order of that magnitude. If a private citizen violates a studio non-disclosure agreement, the corporation holds the right to immediately sue for massive financial damages. A team of ruthless lawyers can seize bank accounts, place heavy liens on private property, and drag the individual through a humiliating, incredibly expensive multi-year court battle. O'Heaney was no longer a connected Hollywood insider. The survivor was a private citizen working for an environmental charity. The financial risk of speaking out against an established movie star and a legendary director was absolute total ruin. The studio relied heavily on that specific financial fear to keep her quiet. Despite that massive looming legal threat, the former actress made an incredibly calculated, deeply courageous choice. O'Heaney looked at the shifting cultural landscape, looked at the bravery of the women exposing Weinstein, and decided to completely ignore the billionaire studio lawyers. She took that 30-year-old gag order, completely disregarded it, and contacted the national press. She did not just offer a vague, anonymous quote. The survivor handed the original police report, the signed settlement documents, and the horrifying, unedited details of the audition room directly to investigative journalists. She brought the absolute proof. By releasing those specific, undeniable documents to the public, O'Heaney completely destroyed the artistic myth surrounding that blockbuster biographical movie. She dragged the violent truth directly out of the shadows and forced it into the modern media cycle. The former actress explicitly named the massive leading man who attacked her. She explicitly named the legendary director who stood in the room, crossed his arms, and laughed at her physical pain. She forced the entire American film industry to look at the ugly, unedited reality behind their celebrated cinematic masterpieces. This delayed revelation delivered a massive, fatal blow to the toxic system. For 30 years, those executives wrapped themselves in expensive tailored suits, accepted prestigious lifetime achievement awards, and pretended to be brilliant champions of high art. O'Heaney's public testimony completely tore down that fake image. Her statement proved beyond any doubt that the foundation of their massive commercial success was built entirely on physical violence, extreme manipulation, and corporate intimidation. The men thought they bought her silence forever, but they merely delayed the truth until the culture finally caught up to their crimes. The Hollywood machine tried to buy a woman's dignity for pocket change and banish her to the shadows to protect a movie release. They completely underestimated the raw survival instinct of the person they attacked. The system assumed she would remain quiet collateral damage forever. Instead, Caitlin O'Heaney became the ultimate undeniable whistleblower. Her decision to step forward decades later stands as a monumental testament to the absolute power of modern female self-reliance. She refused to play the quiet, defeated victim of a powerful industry. She took control of her own narrative, used her own traumatic history, and held powerful men publicly accountable. The courageous act proved that a cheap corporate contract can never permanently suppress the truth, especially when a survivor finally decides they have absolutely nothing left to lose. Today, the American public looks at Val Kilmer through a lens of deep sympathy. A brutal battle with throat cancer stole his physical voice. The industry rallied behind him, using artificial intelligence to bring him back for Top Gun: Maverick. In his highly emotional 2021 documentary, the actor finally reflected on his past. He openly admitted he behaved terribly on movie sets, calling his own past actions bizarre. But we have to look at what was completely missing from that documentary film. There was absolutely no mention of that violent audition room. Most importantly, there has never been a single public apology directed at Caitlin O'Heaney. We can feel compassion for an aging artist fighting a terrible illness. Empathy is human. However, a severe medical diagnosis does not act as an excuse for decades of psychological and physical damage. The Hollywood machine loves to use present-day tragedy to hide the abuse of the past. They want the audience to forget the bruised women and the destroyed careers. We cannot let the industry rewrite history using pity. When a famous director and an A-list actor decide to extract cinematic authenticity directly from the real trauma of a female colleague, that resulting product is never art. It is simply institutionalized brutality heavily disguised as a masterpiece. That toxic era must end. When the director yells cut, the cameras stop rolling. But the trauma for these actresses does not. What we have just seen is proof of a toxic power dynamic, where art becomes a shield for abuse and silence is bought with fame. It is time for the truth to be heard. What are your thoughts on this dark reality? Leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to Actor Secrets as we continue to expose the dark side of Hollywood. Thanks for watching.